Welcome.
Yeah.
You guys, can you give me a minute? Can you hear me?
Hey, Alyssa. How are
Alisa,
you?
hi. Alisa, hi. I'm good.
Yeah.
My laptop crashed, so I'm on my iPhone, and I'm just booting it back up. So if you can give me like a minute, I can be on better.
No worries. Thanks,
The
Alisa.
Okay,
iPhone's
so-
very edgy.
Yeah, so just like give me a minute, please.
That's okay. Hi,
I'm
everybody.
using my iPhone too, Alisa.
Yeah, I'd rather be on my laptop so I don't have to like hold it in front of my face and do all of
I'm
that.
using my iPad, so it's
So you'll see
Yeah.
me log in again, I think, in a minute. Anyway, I mean, if you need to start, go ahead, but I'm going to log in again on the...
I already did. I am so sorry. I got that message
Okay.
right after I disabled the waiting room. So
All right.
thanks
Okay,
everyone
that's all
for
right.
joining us today. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Our wonderful faculty member, Elisa Solomon, is going to just reboot her her laptop so she can have a better view. But we'll get started in another couple of moments. And just to welcome you all, thanks so much for joining us today. Lots of news happening in the United States right now. I know we have a very diverse group of students who are joining us today. So thank you all so much for joining us. My name is John Graham. I'm an assistant director of admissions here at Columbia Journalism School. I'm here by a host of wonderful staff, alums, and faculty. And we are going to get started in just a moment. I will let Christine kind of take it away as soon as we get everything underway. Oh, and Brandon's here. Great. Hi, Brandon. Thanks so much for joining. I'm going to make you a co-host. So you will be able to unmute yourself when you need to. All right. Thank you so much. Christine, I will let you take it away.
Super. Thank you. Thank you, John. Welcome, everybody. I'm Christine Souters. I'm the Associate Dean for Admission and Financial Aid here at Columbia Journalism School. And we're delighted to have you with us today. It's a beautiful morning here in New York City. There are no clouds in the sky. It's a perfect fall morning. We wish we could have you here to join us in person. But in the meantime, we're delighted that you're with us on Zoom. And we've got what I think is a great program for you. We're looking forward to talking with you, to answering your questions, and to just giving you some information about Columbia Journalism School, about the programs that we offer. You'll be talking with some of our wonderful alumni, our faculty. My colleague Gina Bubian is here from the Career Services Office. So we're going to try and give you as complete a picture as we can in what we recognize as a short amount of time. I'm just going to say very briefly that the school offers a number of different programs for journalists who might be at various stages in their careers. Our Master of Science program, the General Master of Science program, is designed for people who are at the beginning of a career in journalism. They might be coming directly from undergraduate school. They might have a couple of years of experience in journalism. They might be changing careers and want to learn to be journalists, to bring what they have learned in their prior careers and take that into journalism with them. That program offers specializations also in investigative and documentary filmmaking. We also have a program in data journalism, a 12-month data journalism program that focuses very specifically on how you use data and computation in journalism. Our Master of Science program also offers some dual degree programs with other divisions here at Columbia, including the law school, the business school, the School of International and Public Affairs, and the religion department at the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. And of course, we have one international dual degree program with Sciences Po in Paris. Our Master of Arts program is designed for people who are already into their careers as professional journalists, who know basically everything that we teach in the MS program. So they're comfortable with their reporting, their writing, their audio skills, data skills, with their video skills, that kind of thing. And they're ready to dig deeper into a subject area. And we offer 4 concentrations in the Master of Arts program. They include arts and culture reporting, business and economics reporting, political reporting, both domestic and international, and science, health, and technology reporting. My faculty colleague, Elisa Solomon, will be talking a little bit more about that program as well. And then we also offer a PhD program in communications. This program today is really going to focus on the master's level programs. We've got a program about the PhD program coming up, or rather a webinar about the PhD program coming up later this week. And you can also find additional information, including a webinar that has been posted on our, in the admissions section of the website. So without further ado, I am going to turn the program over to the next speaker.
It's me.
Okay, Ross, thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ross Yelsey. I'm the Assistant Director of Admission and Marketing for the school. I'm also an alumnus of the Master of Arts program myself. And I'm really pleased to be able to host this faculty discussion with 3 members of our faculty who will discuss different aspects of the Master of Science and the Master of Arts programs we have. And our faculty members today are Dolores Barclay, Mark Hansen, and Elisa Solomon. So thank you for coming to join us. And what we'll do is I'll ask some questions of the faculty, and then John will monitor the chat. So we'll have a portion a little after we have our discussion where you could pose some questions in the chat that you'd like our faculty to talk about. So we'll do that in a few minutes after our initial discussion. So I'll start with Dolores. Dolores, could you tell us a little bit about your own career in journalism, and also tell us a bit about the class you were recently teaching in the Master of Science program, the reporting module, which is what all students in our Master of Science program begin their curriculum with, which is all the essentials of reporting.
Well, my career in journalism started at the Associated Press, where I had what we call a really good ride. I started out as a street reporter on the Metropolitan desk, covering everything from police, city hall, the courts, you name it, I did it. And then I became a feature writer, a national writer, investigative reporter. I went all over the world, the country, and did some really wonderful stories that I can be proud of. Here at Columbia, I teach a reporting class and a writing class. In fact, I am on campus today, and my writing class is busy doing a writing drill while I'm talking to you. In the reporting module, I like to start students off immediately reporting. They must come up with their own story ideas. They must report it out. They're on the street, on the job immediately. And I generally have them do at least one business story, and very often a political story and a crime story, and a story of their own choosing. The editing is line editing and is quite stringent, and they will do as many drafts as it takes to have a complete final version that's publishable. We have guest speakers. I've had guest speakers discuss breaking news, crisis reporting, for example. I have a science writer come in, and you might say, why? Well, you know, sometimes an editor might say, you know, I want you to do this science story. So instead of going nuts, you can find out exactly how to go about doing that type of reporting, because a good reporter can do anything. In the writing segment, we write. The students have, instead of 4 or 5 stories to do in a semester that are shorter, the students will do 2 1,500-word feature stories. One has to be a profile and the other is a story of their own choosing. Meanwhile, during class, I have writing projects for them. For example, last week, I sent them to the Hudson River and they had to come back with a 100 word or less description of either the river or the bridge. And then we workshopped those descriptions in class. So the whole idea is to learn how to show rather than tell, and to develop a narrative style and good storytelling. But above all, accuracy, fairness, reporting a story out, and good, stylish, solid writing that tells a good story.
Great, thanks, Dolores. And I'll move on to Mark Hansen. Mark, could you tell us a bit about your background in journalism and also about some of the courses you offer in computational and data journalism for Master of Science students, and kind of what computational and data journalism entails as the way you teach it at Columbia?
Okay, so hello, I'm Mark. I've been in the school 8 years now, I guess. Yeah, and my background in journalism, well, just to be in the spirit of full disclosure, my doctorate's in statistics, so I come with overdeveloped statistics skills. And I come to journalism through the R&D lab at the New York Times, and spent a fair bit of time there. And also designed the lobby art. If we're ever able to get out of our homes and get into buildings again, you can go visit it. But anyway, I come to journalism from a very oblique angle. And as Ross said, I teach probably the only things I can teach in the school, which have to do with computation and with statistics, and helping students develop the skills that they need to dig through and find stories through data, tell stories through data. I teach a computational journalism class in the spring, 6-unit class, where we teach students along the way the basics of Python, how they might look out to things like Twitter and YouTube and those sorts of systems as things to be reported on. We learn about recommendation systems, we learn about network analysis, we learn about how to think about text as data. And not all of it is like clickety-clackety, super technical. Like they're not always stories that end or begin where you think they will. Like my computational class last semester, or last spring, one of the best projects was a group of students who had turned every episode of The Bachelor into a data set that they slowly analyzed to try to see if there was something about the editing that could help someone anticipate who the winner was going to be. So they looked at season after season after season, and there are lots of seasons of The Bachelor, let me just say that. But then there have been other sort of more straight up. I also teach, because I'm not quite sure why there isn't a class on this, but I teach usually in the spring, something we've been calling stats breakfasts. So we'll introduce students to the basics of statistics through a series of between 5 and 7 breakfasts, because we would literally serve bagels. I don't know what we do now, but anyway, one day, again, there will be a literal breakfast to teach students the basics of inference, how polls work, how we reason with uncertainty, those sorts of things that seem so important, especially in this season. So anyway, that's the kind of thing that I do. I'm just Mark H at columbia.edu, MARKH at columbia.edu, if you have any questions. Ross?
Thank you, Mark. And Elisa, I know Christina already outlined a bit of the differences between the Master of Science and the Master of Arts program. As the director of the Master of Arts, Arts and Culture program, can you tell us a bit about kind of some of the key elements of the curriculum for MA students, you know, in arts and culture and in the larger program?
Sure, glad to, and I guess I should say a little bit about my background as well, how I came to Columbia J School. So I have a background that sort of combines or has a bit of each of Mark's and Dolores's, both as an academic. I have a doctorate in theater studies, and I went to write. Well, not exactly, it took a little while, but my first journalistic job after graduate school was at the Village Voice, where I began as a theater critic. And then more along the kind of path of Dolores, though not as extensive, I started writing. I was always interested in politics and everything, and I just started writing other kinds of things at the Voice and became a staff writer. I always wrote about theater for my 21 years there, but I also ended up covering immigration policy, Palestine-Israel conflict, queer culture and politics, women's basketball, kind of a generalist with particular beats that I picked up along the way. Meanwhile, I was teaching full-time at the City University of New York in Baruch College. I was teaching journalism courses and sometimes the Shakespeare class to undergraduates. And meanwhile, at the graduate school, the CUNY Graduate School, I was teaching in the PhD theater program and directing the Center for Lesbian and Gay Studies. And when the MA program was about to begin at Columbia J School, and there was a position open to come and basically begin the arts concentration, it seemed like a great opportunity for me to bring together all the different threads of things I was doing, to combine the teaching, the arts and culture aspect, and the journalistic aspect, you know, all in one place. And so I was very excited to begin with the MA program when it got off the ground in 2005, and 2 years later, David Haydu, my partner in arts and culture concentration, joined, and each of the concentrations has its own dedicated faculty. So the other concentrations, just to emphasize, are science, politics, and business economics. And anyone interested in the MA program applies specifically to one of those concentrations. And you'll see in the application that we ask you to explain why you want to pursue that particular area. And the whole point is to deepen your understanding of the field, to be able to write about the issues and stories and subjects that you're passionate about, with more depth, more nuance, more complexity, to be able to read scholarly studies and understand them well, and to interview experts with good grounding, to know what kinds of questions to ask and whom. And these all build on the kinds of skills that Dolores was talking about in the MS. And so people in the MA need to already know how to do the kinds of reporting that she was describing, and to be able to write well. And then we try to take those to the next level in this concentrated way. In arts and culture specifically, we organize the course seminar, which is one of several required courses that students take. And I'll just give a long parenthesis here to say that MA students, I think uniquely for our program, in addition to required courses at the J School, take some graduate level electives elsewhere at Columbia. And this is just an astonishing opportunity, I think, because, after all, Columbia is one of the great research universities of the world. So if you're interested specifically in film, you can take in the course of the year 3 classes in film studies, or you can you could take film studies and art history and African American studies, or you can take Puerto Rican literature and intellectual property in the law school, whatever it is that is, or music courses, whatever is appropriate to what you want to do. And then you have the J School courses like the seminar, which is what David Haydu and I teach in arts and culture, and the other dedicated MA faculty teach. In the arts and culture concentration in the fall, we look at some key concepts. What is art? What is culture? Who counts as an artist? How do arts institutions work? Those kinds of questions. And in the spring, it's a little bit more policy, politics, economics, those kinds of things. We work with faculty partners for about 1/3 of our classes. That is, we bring experts from elsewhere at Columbia or sometimes other institutions to do dedicated sessions with us, because after all, they're the experts. And we do some cool field trips. And this year, because of the pandemic and wanting to be outside as much as possible, we've had some amazing outdoor classes. Just on Thursday, a couple days ago, we did a unit that we do every year on memorialization, commemoration, and collective national memory projects. And instead of sitting in the room discussing the readings and looking at a slideshow that I have that's actually a pretty good slideshow, but instead we met at the World Trade Center Memorial and spent some time looking at it. We sat on a bench in the sun for about 1.5 hours discussing the readings and the theory around these things. We walked over to the nearby memorial to the Irish famine. Then we got on city bikes and we rode up the river pathway to the first of a first very modest AIDS memorial along the river, and then the recent LGBTQ Pulse nightclub shooting memorial, and then across 12th Street to the National AIDS Memorial. And bringing all of our discussion and observation of these places into play. So that's an example of one class, but I could go on for hours, but I'll pass it back to Ross for now.
I know, everything sounds fascinating, so we have to close it at some point, but we'll be happy to get more questions from people if you want to know more about these programs. For Dolores, can I ask you about the Master's Project, which Master of Science program students all will undertake while they're students, in terms of doing an ambitious piece of reporting, either in a print, audio, or visual kind of method. Can you talk about how you work with students in the Master of Science program on their master's projects?
Oh, sure. First, I'd like to say one thing I tell all of my students, even if they are not my advisees, one important thing: start early. Get an idea early, kind of even before you meet with your advisor. Dive in, do some pre-reporting so you're prepared, because the master's goes quickly. It's on top of you quickly, and if you wait until the holiday break to do everything, you're going to be in trouble. I start out at the end of September sometimes with my advisees, certainly early October. I usually have around 6, maybe more advisees. So I initially run it like a class, and we discuss narrative writing. I've done we used to have something called a hybrid, where a student could do part video and then a 2,500 word story to go with it. We're not particularly doing that too much anymore. So mostly it's print students doing a 5,000 word piece. And our little sessions, we talk about narrative writing. We talk about the structure of a long form piece. And I like to talk to them about, think of you're creating a good 5-act play, and you're going to have that climax and that denouement, and it's going to be compelling and just really, really full of drama. And even if it's a lighter subject, it's going to be so gratifying for the reader. And we get into it. I give them some good examples of some really good long form features that we discuss in these little classes. We really pull them apart. and they understand the elements of building a story. And I have them, I give them deadlines immediately for pitching 3 good ideas. One kind of pre-reported, the others as backups, and get them started. I look for an outline from them by the end of November. Beginning of December, I'm looking for a good solid opening, a good lead. And that's not just one paragraph, of course. In a long form story, your opening or lead, your act 1, if you will, can be a couple of 100 words easily. So I look at their opening, I look at their outlines, and we go on from there. First draft is due in January. I work individually with the students. By the time they get to their openings and their outlines, we no longer have the group sessions. Instead, I will meet with students face-to-face. Well, maybe not this year, but in past years, face-to-face, at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. And we're on the phone with each other, we're texting, we're emailing, but there's very, very close contact. So they know they're not going through this alone. Some of them, very often, their stories will take them outside of New York. We try to keep New York-centric characters, makes it easier for them to get the color they need, the access they need. But there are occasions when they might need some brief travel. One student did a piece that took her to Columbia. She was from Columbia, and she was able to get her interviews done while on Christmas break. But she had done a considerable amount of outside reporting before then. We do not have a huge travel budget, but there may be $200. You can apply for a travel stipend if one of your characters is going to take you outside of New York, but it has to be for a really good reason. The stories have greatly ranged from child suicide to a very good piece one student did that was international in scope on women leaving Islam and the horrors many face, including death, from leaving some of the more orthodox sects, to ayahuasca, a native so-called remedy or hallucinogen that had become popular a couple of years ago, to kids in sports and brain dysfunction. Big range, huge range, and some lighter subjects as well. I just encourage the writers to do something that's meaningful because it's a deep dive. You're going to be with this for several months, and to have great reporting and brilliant writing. Make it sing. Ross.
Thanks, Dolores. And for Elisa, Master of Arts students will be doing a master's thesis, which is similar in some respects to the master's project. Can you tell a little bit about how they differ and kind of how you work with students in the MA program on their theses?
Sure. So the MA thesis, it's called a thesis because the state requires students who deserve an MA to have completed something called a thesis. But it is a piece of journalism. It shouldn't be confused. It's not an academic research paper, though there is research, deep research involved in it. It's a work of narrative journalism, of long form narrative journalism. That's about 8,000 words if it's a print story, which it usually is, though not necessarily. So its purpose is to apply the kinds of thinking and the ever more beautiful prose style that students are working on through the MA program in a long form piece that marries compelling narrative with deep fact-based analysis. And so it's putting together the skills of storytelling with all of the skills of research, critical analysis, deep approach to the subject, full contextualization that you're working on through the year. And each student is paired with an advisor/editor who works very closely with them, similar to the way Dolores described with the master's projects. We meet, each of us does it a little differently. I usually have 5 students I'm working with each year, and in the fall I start meeting as a group because there's a lot of things to go over. It's useful to go over them together, and also because we work as a kind of editorial team where people can brainstorm and give each other ideas. But once each project is shaped, then I start meeting individually with students, and they have different steps and benchmarks along the way, so we know that they're sort of on the right track. Reporting memos, reporting plans, memos about where they're at, and then quite a number of drafts, which we go through very carefully for structure, which I think is one of the hardest things for long form. And then we do a sit-down line edit in the last week, which can take anywhere from 3 to, I think the longest one I ever did was 11 hours, where we sit together and read through the piece line by line and help make it sing and find, we try to do it not too much at the last minute. So if there's still some reporting that needs to be plugged in, there's still time to do that, and so on. And it's a very gratifying process. Students often worry that this is a new challenge and are they going to make it? And I can say in 15 years of the program now, everybody has crossed that finish line with a flourish, and we've had some great projects. And just to name quickly a couple of the ones that I've had the chance to work on as advisor, we had an early one on the relationship between Chinese opera performers in China and in the United States, and the kind of conflict between the artists in China who thought that the Chinese American performers were sort of adulterating the form. We had a great one on a new generation of Afrofuturist artists. We had a great one on how spam became an element in Asian cooking. We had one on war photography in Iran. Had a great one last year on a new generation of queer figurative artists. We had an award-winning one a few years ago on an art program for death row inmates in a prison in Tennessee, and so forth. I mean, I could talk a lot about those too, and happy to answer questions.
Great, thanks, Elisa. And for Mark, you're the director of the Brown Institute for Media Innovation, which is housed within the Columbia Journalism School building, Pulitzer Hall. Could you tell us a bit about what the Institute does and how students at the school can take advantage of its resources?
Absolutely. Although lately we have not been housed in the in Pulitzer Hall, we have been decamped and are all over the place. But the Brown Institute, I guess it's 8 years old also. So I was hired as its inaugural director. It was funded by an endowment, a gift from Helen Gurley Brown, who was the longtime editor of Cosmo magazine. Her husband, David Brown, was a movie producer working with Steven Spielberg and so on. And so it's an interesting, our mandate. So let me back up. The institute that was created is half at Columbia Journalism and half at Stanford School of Engineering. And our mission is about looking at how technology and journalism come together, how we can perhaps morph the priorities, the research priorities for engineering, bringing them closer to journalism, and then also studying what new artifacts of engineering, what sort of impact do they have on journalism. You can have a look at the sort of things we do at our website. I just posted it to the chat, brown.columbia.edu, but I'll tell you briefly what we do. We first and foremost, we have seminars and training events that we offer to students. Our seminar series this year, we have 2 going. One is called Changing Course, and it's looking at data and computation, but from different traditions. The idea of sort of opening up the practice of data visualization, computation more broadly. So the talks that we've had, for example, the next one is by Catherine D'Ignazio from MIT and Lauren Klein on what's called data feminism. And then after that, we have a new researcher from Berkeley, as you probably know, reporting on algorithms, reporting on computation, and what happens when it gets applied in social systems is a hot topic, whether it's predictive policing or the sort of algorithms that people use for deciding if you get parole or not. People have been questioning the fairness of those algorithms. And so there's been a lot of like hand-wringing in computer science about what to do with algorithms, right? And we're having a discussion from Radit Abebe, who will be talking about how can computation be used to affect social change, right? How can you do it? How can you use it in a positive way? We also are in the middle of a series called Apocalypse Pending. It's about basically QAnon. The first was about QAnon and social media. The second is about apocalyptic evangelicals and QAnon. We also have a series of training sessions that we call the Transparency Series. They're a kind of weekend event where we teach you everything from the basics of polling to volumetric sort of 3D capture, augmented reality, how you might use that in journalism, natural language processing, artificial intelligence. All these things will be covered. I mean, to the extent that you can cover them completely in a day worth of and we'll bring in journalistic sort of experts to teach these topics. There's a scholarship that you can apply for when you apply. The Brown Institute Scholarship is one of the scholarships that you can apply for. We also offer internships that sometimes we craft sort of on our own. Like we go out and try to find opportunities for our graduating students. We have 3 graduating students this year, for example, working on an internship with Consumer Reports. The whole point of this is to use the California Consumer Privacy Act, which allows people to ask for the data that has been collected on them by various companies or corporate groups. And so how can you take that legislative piece of leverage, scale it up to a kind of rallying point that Consumer Reports can have, right? So you can have thousands or tens of thousands of people making requests through Consumer Reports. Bring all that data back and see what's going on behind the scenes. How is our data being used? Is it being used in ways that are fair or seem to be providing interesting or reasonable results? I'm rambling a little. The last thing I should mention is that the endowment spits off about $1 million a year that we give away in the form of grants to graduates of the school. So if you're taking your master's thesis, for example, and you stumble on something that you really want to pursue, or that requires some new piece of technology, or requires something else, something extra, we can fund you for a year through what's called the Magic Grant program. And the magic in Magic Grants comes from Helen Gurley Brown, who thought of this program as doing a little bit of magic in someone's life. So you want to pursue something, and this gives you up to $150,000 for a year to do your work. Our grants this year, you can see them all at brown.columbia.edu, but they go everywhere from community Wi-Fi in Appalachia to a project called Wolfpack, which is joint with the Marshall Project, looking at the extent to which the media and its sort of style of reporting in the 80s and 90s led to the mass incarceration movement. We have another project that involves a few of our graduates that is essentially a massive Freedom of Information Act request to counties, cities, and states, local governments, and health departments for any emails about COVID. And at this point, something on the order of 33 articles have appeared from this project, from front page New York Times articles about the meatpacking industry and COVID, to just recently one of the Illinois, a county in Illinois, one of their FOIA officers let a little too much information out. So suddenly there's now in the public a complete list of the state of Illinois' COVID outbreaks. I apologize. The city that I'm in is deliriously happy with this morning's news. So there's lots of horns going off. Actually, I have no reason to apologize for that. Anyway, there's horns going on. Anyway, think about a Magic Grant as a way of continuing your time at Columbia and deepening your interest in a project. And I'd be happy to talk with you about any of these programs, but have a look at our website. And again, markh@columbia.edu, markh@columbia.edu. Ross, sorry I went long.
No problem. And we're going to get some questions from you in a moment answered from our faculty. But before that, Elisa, did you have something you wanted to add as well?
Yeah, thanks. One of the questions that we get a lot from prospective students has to do with which program is right for them. And somebody will say, you know, I love the arts. I really want to write about music. It's the thing I want to do most, but I have no journalism experience. Can I still come to the MA in Arts and Culture? The short answer is no. There are exceptions sometimes, but the MA really expects that students already know how to do a story with multiple sources and some complexity. And that's what you would learn in the MS program. But if you're interested in the arts or in one of the other concentrations of the MA, you know, politics, science, business, there are also MS courses where you can focus on those areas as well. And all of us who teach in the MA program also teach in the MS program. I, for instance, sometimes teach an arts criticism class, which is for MS students. The last couple of years, I've been teaching a course in covering issues of gender and sexuality. If it gets approved for next semester by our Committee on Instruction, I'll be teaching a course next semester in advocacy and movement journalism and looking at that historically and contextually, and also sort of the doing of it. There's a course there's a course in reporting on arts and culture. Marguerite Holloway, one of our great faculty members in the science concentration, teaches a covering climate change course as an MS elective. Sandro Stillo, who teaches in politics, sometimes does a writing about ideas, a political ideas course in the MS, and so forth. So there's still places for you to pursue those interests in the MS if you also need to learn basic journalistic skills. But we're always happy to talk to you if you're not sure which program. Ross is a great person to talk to about that. And then sometimes if you don't know, you think you're ready for the MA, but you're not sure which concentration. You love politics, you also love arts and culture. We're happy to have that conversation as well.
Definitely. Thanks, Elisa. And so, John, I know you've been looking at the chat. Do you have a couple of questions that we can pose to the faculty?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ross. And Elisa, you answered about 4 questions there. So thank you very much. So I've got about 3 left. So one of the questions, obviously, many people are starting to get their applications, completed. They're about to submit. And we mentioned that the Master of Science program does not really require journalistic experience, but for those who really want to, enhance their application, what should they do for the journalistic clips section if they don't have clips to send? What are your recommendations on what they should send in that area? Anyone can answer that, and whoever feels more comfortable.
I think if they don't have clips, they should send whatever writings they have. In fact, they should write an essay on their own. Pick a subject that they think in some way would be newsy or even journalistic, something that's not an opinion piece or a memoir, but just an essay. It gives us some guidance to their thinking and to their ability to actually tell a story. Not everyone will have clips. So, you know, I understand that this can be a handicap, but go that extra mile.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Now, the master's project, I think, is something that a lot of people are interested. It's obviously, you know, a culminating experience for all of our master's students. Right now, we know that travel is restricted. There is, you know, there is not the ability to go and cover something in a global scale at this time. But in the future, should there be a vaccine or medication that can help to, you know, dissipate the impact of COVID-19, is there an ability to do a master's project on something that's more global, where it does, you know, potentially require some international reporting?
I've had students who have done that. Some have done it by Skype and FaceTime. Some because, you know, I think I mentioned the student from Colombia, because their holiday travel took them back home, or just took them abroad for some reason or another. It can be worked in, but on a large scale, the school does not provide stipend for overseas travel for master's projects. But there definitely, you can do it. You can do it by Skype easily. It's not going to give you that firsthand observational component that would give you the color you need, or actually seeing something in action, unless of course you have your subject parade his or her laptop around an area or room to show you what's going on. And hey, we do that. But it's doable. I think it's something you need to talk to your advisor about.
Thank you. Elisa, you wanted to say something? Oh, wait, if you could unmute yourself.
Sorry. In the MA program for the master's thesis, there is funding available, and quite a number of the MA theses are international stories, you know, assuming that there's no raging pandemic. And there are grants available. You have to apply for them. You have to have a very concrete story proposal already ready. You have to have your sources lined up. You're not going to get a travel grant to say you want to go someplace and, you know, hope to find people. You know, it already needs to be established, and it also needs to be something that you really need to see. It's, you know, you can't get a travel grant to go interview somebody in their office. You could, you know, just as well do that on the phone or on Skype. But if there's an opportunity to see people in action, to get the, you know, the setting and the activity that you need to make the narrative story, and you have done the homework and connected with the sources, you can apply for and, you know, typically get a grant to travel for the MA thesis.
Excellent, thanks so much. I know that we are running behind. There are lots of questions about admissions and financial aid, which we'll be happy to cover at the end of this session. But for now, I know we'll need to move on to our next portion. So thank you all so much for your questions and for answering them, our lovely faculty.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And I think, John, you'll take on the Alumni Chat next. So thanks a lot.
Absolutely, thank you so much. So
Okay,
I have thank you. Thanks, faculty, Elisa, Dolores, and Mark. You're fantastic. I now have the immense pleasure of introducing Brandon Drennan and Jen Maris-Perez, who are both alums of our Master of Science program. Thank you both so much for joining us today. Brandon, I'm going to start with you. If you could just, you know, briefly tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing right now professionally, and why you applied for the MS program.
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandon Drennan, and I was a career changer when I applied to the MS program at Columbia, and I was accepted. So one thing I really like to tell people that are kind of considering whether or not to apply because they're questioning whether or not they're qualified, I didn't have the journalism experience that many of you may perceive most students have. But if your convictions are leading you in this direction and you're sitting here today, you know, wanting to apply, I say go for it, because if you don't, you won't get in. So you have nothing to lose by trying. That said, prior to Columbia, I was a personal trainer for 7 years in New York, and then I attended, took lots of wonderful classes, learned from the best that the industry has to offer, and now I'm working with BBC in their digital division called BBC Real, and I'm working as a fellow, but in the capacity of a producer. So I'm doing two things predominantly. Thing one is housekeeping with website stuff. So coming up with headlines for stories, writing summaries for stories. When video producers are creating stories, but there are gaps in them, they need visuals or they need interviews, I fill in the void and help them to shoot things or find experts to talk to. In addition to that, I'm also producing my own series where I'm doing the reporting, I'm doing the shooting, I'm doing the editing. And oddly enough, they found a way to also make me the correspondent. So I'm doing some on-camera work as well. And fortunately, because of the experiences I had at Columbia, I was able to prepare myself to really be able to manage all those varying tasks. So I'm very thrilled with the way things have panned out in my decision-making.
Thank you. And I just want to let everyone know that, you know, Brandon's a great example of someone who may not have had journalistic experience, but amazing writing and awesome, interesting story, which can also really help to enhance an application if you're worried about that. Jen Maris, if you could also introduce yourself and talk about what you're doing now professionally, how you got there, and also why you applied to the MS program.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, John. So my name is Jamaris, and like Brandon, I also came to Columbia with like no journalism experience, just like a little puppy dog. Like, I want to be a journalist. Can I do it? And Columbia was like, hell yeah, you can. So I'm super grateful for that experience. I'm originally from New York, but I was raised in South Florida, which is where I'm based now, thanks to the pandemic. So I graduated from Florida State University, and my degree was in media and communications. I knew I wanted to do something with writing and something to that extent. So when I applied to Columbia, my experience, like Brendan, I was a career changer. My experience was with a startup that focused on educational consulting. So I worked with high school students on their college applications, networking with admissions officers, things like that. And kind of looking back, I realized that what I did love about that was meeting these students who were so impressive and had their own backgrounds, and helping them kind of package their story and selling that to an admissions officer. So you can kind of find a way, even if your experience isn't directly in journalism, there are skills that you have that translate over, right? So when I came to Columbia, I didn't know nothing. I didn't know what a nut graph was or how to pitch, any of that important stuff that all of you guys will learn. But I wanted to prove that I could do it and focus on telling these stories and connecting with people. And so the reason I applied to Columbia specifically was because I wanted that hands-on experience to kind of make up for that experience I felt that I lacked, and, you know, grasp the essentials quickly and learn to do them really well from, you know, people that have been doing it for so long. So where I'm at now, I currently work remotely as a production assistant at StoryCorps, which I also hadn't heard of them until I came to Columbia. So, you know, just changing my life, it's fine. But I became a big fan of the work that StoryCorps does from one of the lecture series at Columbia. And now I work with various producers on the production team to put together our weekly segments on NPR's Morning Edition.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Brandon, you did the visual craft track, and that's not something that a lot of people know a lot about. It's not something we really advertise openly to the public. It's something you kind of apply to once you are admitted. Can you tell us about that, specifically about Professor Tu's multimedia storytelling class, and what appealed to you about visual storytelling?
So I enjoy storytelling as a whole, but I think my favorite is the visual medium. I just really enjoy a well-polished video that can aesthetically really tell a good story along with the text and the quotes from experts. So that's just my favorite medium for storytelling. Why the visual craft track? I knew that I wanted to go to Columbia to improve my writing, and I didn't want to lose that by applying into the documentary program. So I liked what the visual craft had to offer because I could dive deep into camera skill training and also still work on my writing. And I can't imagine doing it any other way. It was really great because in the visual craft, you simultaneously learn video storytelling and photojournalism. And that's an experience that documentary students don't get. And the benefit of that is while you're taking your photo class, you can really focus on aesthetics and composition and lighting and just a beautiful image, which to some degree is a little simpler than when you're working on video storytelling, where you now have to worry about sound and camera movement and blah, blah, blah. So you can polish your eye in both of these regards. And my master's project was print. So I was really able to do it all. And for someone that has a love for video and video storytelling, but also wants to improve their writing skills, I would encourage them to consider the visual craft track.
Amazing, thank you. And Jamaris, I always, whenever I'm talking to people about the curriculum, the thing that we always like get into the nitty gritty about are the 15-week seminar and production courses. I'm actually going to drop a link here for everyone to take a look at the comprehensive list of options that we have to offer here at Columbia Journalism School. But you chose Art of the Profile and Radio Workshop. And so I just wanted to know how you came to choosing those and what kind of skills you gained from those experiences.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll say that unlike Brandon, who is so lucky that he had this skill and this passion that he knew that he wanted to pursue, I am a lot more indecisive. So I came in, and I guess I want to say that it's okay if you're not quite sure what you want to do. Columbia's a really great place to figure that out. So when I came to J School, I only knew two things, which was that I liked writing and I liked people. And I was like, let's go from there. So that's what I had to guide me when I was choosing my classes. I originally wanted to do television broadcast. And so I was planning on doing that for one of my seminar classes. There's a required boot camp that you do before you take the class, just to make sure you have like the technical aspects down that you need to know, all those great things that Brandon was talking about that just go like way over my head, like exposure and editing. And I'm like, I don't know. So during the boot camp, I realized that I didn't really enjoy that part as much, and I didn't really click with it. So I'm like stressing, and I have to think of another, production class to switch into. And so I thought back to another required boot camp that was actually part of my reporting class. And that was led by Sam Sanders from NPR's It's Been a Minute. And it was an audio boot camp. And in that weekend, we had to produce and record and edit like a minute-long story. I remember I did mine on like a friend's pop-up that was in Soho that weekend. And honestly, like looking back, it was a really lame piece. But I remember that weekend, I was so stressed, and I ended up being so incredibly proud of this 60-second piece that I had produced. I had never done audio before in my life. So I was like, all right, that wasn't terrible, so I guess I'll do that for my class. And so I switched into Audio 1 with Sally Herships, who is amazing. She was super tough, but I can say honestly that everything that I know and that I do on a daily basis in my job now, I learned from Sally and from being in that class. And so at the end of Audio 1, the students get to produce their own live radio news broadcast, and everyone gets a different role, as a producer, as a host, all these things. And I really enjoyed that experience. So Sally reached out to me, and she convinced me to do Radio Workshop, which is doing that live broadcast every week in the spring. So I loved that kind of collaborative, fast-paced newsroom aspect. And so I definitely enjoyed the class. It was my favorite experience at Columbia. But I also knew that I wasn't super interested in hard news. I didn't come to Columbia with the idea that I was going to like break the next Watergate. Like that's just not what I was interested in. So I took Art of the Profile in addition to radio workshop, and that was with the wonderful Paula Spann, because I wanted that aspect of being able to really focus on people. I think that there's just really something beautiful about learning from someone who like dedicates their life to this one specific niche thing or has been through a very specific experience. And being able to connect and tell those stories. So Art of the Profile was able to give me that. And now I'm just really lucky because of the job that I have. I feel like I get to use both of those skills that I learned from those two classes.
Amazing, thank you. I love how you both take these past experiences and kind of, you know, allow them to infuse choices you made at journalism school, and you're still kind of, you know, those experiences are very transferable skills and have, you know, led you onto this path that is journalism today. So it's really cool. I hear a lot of students ask, you know, I don't have any experience, what do I do? And you both just beautifully summed up how you can take a skill that can be applied to the field of journalism and how that then serves as an arc throughout the rest of your curriculum and then moving forward in your career. So thank you both so much. I am getting many questions about admissions. So I am going to hold a lot of those off to the end because, you know, there are logistics about applications and we'll be happy to answer those. But does anyone have any questions for our alums, anything about classes or anything like that that you'd like to ask? All right. I think we're good. You both were wonderful. You said everything clearly and no one has any questions about it. So thank you both so much.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm happy to drop my email in the chat. I know it can be kind of nerve-wracking and I always would leave with like a million questions that I forgot to ask. So if you guys think of anything or just want to be like, girl, like give me the real tea, like I got you. I am happy to answer your questions. Always happy to talk to fellow students.
Hey, good luck, everyone. And yeah, thanks for having me this afternoon. I'll drop my email as well. I'm definitely open to offering advice anyone's looking for it.
Yeah, it was nice to see you again, Brandon.
Good nice seeing you too. I'm jealous you're in Florida.
Don't be, there's like a hurricane coming, it's fine.
Thank you both so much.
Everybody, yep.
Thank you. All right, Ross, I'll turn this back over to you.
All right, and I will turn it over to Gina Boubion, our Director of Career Development, to talk about the career kind of office and what they provide to students and some of the trajectories of our alums. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. So good morning. It's very nice to see everybody today. I am part of the career development team here at Columbia J School, and we guide students on from day one so that you can be competitive in the job market by the time you graduate. And this includes one-on-one advising, dozens and dozens of workshops and media visits all year long, and the annual Career Expo, which is the biggest journalism job fair in the country in terms of number of companies that attend. So our last Expo in April 2020, 230 editors and hiring managers representing 130 news companies participated, and they conducted 2,300 interviews, virtual interviews with members of the class of 2020. It was the first virtual career expo that we've ever had, and we held it at the height of the pandemic in New York City. The pandemic did not stop employers from wanting to interview our students for journalism jobs and internships that they still had available or anticipated having available in the coming weeks and months. So I'm going to show you some slides, and I'm going to share the screen and show you some slides. Okay, so what you're seeing on this word cloud is the 112 news companies that hired at least one student from the class of 2020. And in the chat, I think John's going to share a link to a Dropbox that will give you this information in a different way, maybe easier to digest in your own time. There's a PDF that lists all the news organizations that attended the Career Expo, the virtual Career Expo, and there's a PDF of the 112 companies that hired somebody from the class, or at least one person from the class. So first, a reality check. the tough love. There's no guarantee of a job immediately after graduation. We have no idea what the journalism job market will look like in 2022. We don't know which companies will fold. We don't know which companies will have layoffs and even more layoffs, perhaps related to the pandemic or recovering from the pandemic. We also don't know which companies will come back stronger than ever and start expanding their operations. And certainly there are news organizations that yet to be formed and launched, like there were two that launched in the middle of the pandemic, the 19th, which has been getting a lot of positive news coverage, and it's based in Austin, Texas, and Mountain State Spotlight, which is an investigative news website in West Virginia. These are just two, and they launched in the middle of the summer. So we don't know what's going to happen going forward. But regardless of the incredible flux in the journalism industry, and regardless of how the overall economy is doing, Columbia Journalism School graduates do well in the job market in the months and absolutely in the years after graduation. So I'm going to share with you some information on the past graduating classes so that you can have a bigger picture of how Columbia students fare and what these figures can possibly tell us about the state of journalism in general. So some background. Just before graduation, we send out a questionnaire to the entire class, and we ask them what their plans are for after graduation. And we define employment plans broadly as jobs, internships, fellowships, further academic schooling, freelance careers by choice. So this is important for you to understand as you do your research into other schools that you may also be considering. Grad school is a huge investment of your time and also of your money. So you should be able to find and interrogate this data anywhere you're applying and ask these questions. You should be asking how a school collects its data. You should be asking when they collect their data and what percentage of the class is represented in the data. So from 2011 to 2019, with nearly 100% of each class, graduating class, reporting, 71 to 77% of the graduating class had something lined up within a week or two of graduation. And this number rises throughout the summer. There are variations within these numbers, and I'd like to just talk for a minute about the international students, because I see that there are a number of you on this chat. The international students, by and large, do just as well as the U.S. citizen and green card holders in the class. But you have to try harder, and you have to apply to more positions than any other group, and this should not come as a surprise to you. So in other words, over the last 10 years or so, there really hasn't been that much light between the difference between how the US students do in any given year and the international students. One year, the US students will do a tiny bit better, meaning like 1% better or 2% better. The following year, the international students will do a little bit better. So it really has been sort of even. Okay, then 2020 happened, and the COVID-19 pandemic was absolutely painful for every single group in the class of 2020. As you can see from this slide, 61% of the class had something lined up at graduation. But I'll tell you, it was worse for the international students. This summer, only 56% of the international students had something lined up at graduation, compared to 64% for the U.S. and citizens and permanent green card holders. So I just wanted to just be really honest with you about that. So as I said, however, these numbers do tick up every passing week of summer, and this was true even during the pandemic summer. We kept hearing about students landing something, or we heard of students internships transitioning from an internship into a job. So what kind of positions are our students getting? So the majority of our students, the majority of the positions, I should say, are internships and fellowships at graduation, and these are paid positions. Some of you are probably used to hearing about internships in a less favorable light, in the as unpaid situations. That is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about paid positions of anywhere from 10 weeks to 12 months in duration, and they're paid jobs in newsrooms where you are pulling your weight as a journalist. You're reporting and writing stories. You're producing video and audio. You're making data visualizations and such. You're not sweeping sweeping the floor, you're not getting coffee, you're not doing, you know, organizing a makeup closet. That is not what our students do after graduation. And also an internship is a short-term thing. So for as long as we can remember, this has been the case. In other words, internships and fellowships account for the biggest share of all journalism positions at graduation. It's a trend that we've seen for years, and it holds for all groups of students here, the US citizens, the international students, the MA students, and the MS students. This is because in the journalism industry in the United States, internships are a standard way that but most news organizations use to find and train new employees. So again, we're talking about paid positions. And so the likelihood of getting an internship or a fellowship after graduation is something that you need to be aware of when you come to J School. And in the career office, I'll be honest, we love internships because it's how a student can catapult from J School directly into a major news organization. So international students are allowed to stay in the United States for a year following graduation. You are entitled to apply for an OPT. It stands for Optional Practical Training, and it's an extension of your student visa. And we want international students to be very aware of the fact that it's really, really difficult to transition that OPT into a long-term work authorization situation. In other words, it's uncommon, very uncommon for an international student to be sponsored long-term by a news organizations in the United States. And so therefore, the vast majority of our students will go back or leave the United States after their year, after they get that year of experience in a US newsroom. So there's a caveat. Business and economics journalism and data journalism are mostly where our international students will sometimes find opportunities to stay in the United States for longer than the year of OPT because of the demand in these categories. And we have also seen students who speak Mandarin or who speak Spanish are also in very high demand. And we've also seen students with these language fluencies also get sponsored long-term. So I want to show you a graphic that depicts how all of these journalism positions divide up by news platform. And what you're seeing here are the overall trend lines. And let me just walk you through a few of the trends. The red line is the digital only publications. These are like, the Marshall Project and BuzzFeed and Inverse. These are publications that, these positions have obviously been on an upward trajectory with some serious bouncing around in the last couple of years. The blue and the green lines are the broadcast and newspaper trend lines, and they've been bouncing along for years, kind of holding steady, but you're definitely seeing sort of a steady, slow rise in video and audio production jobs. That's the blue line. It definitely has been on the general upswing. And the orange line is the magazine trajectory. And that has absolutely been on a decline for a long, long time. This should not come as any surprise that magazines were slow to jump on the internet bandwagon. And meanwhile, at the same time, digital only publications that had that kind of voicey, authoritative, long-form writing, those emerged and sort of took their place. The purple line at the bottom, that's the wire service line trajectory. We're talking about Reuters, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, News Service, Agence France Presse, the Associated Press. These are mostly business wires. And these are mostly business and economics reporting positions. This trajectory has kind of been steady for years, but we did see a drop in 2020, and that's because Reuters, which usually hires many of our students, they suspended their internship program due to the pandemic, and the Associated Press did not hire anybody from the class. So what kind of work are our students doing in these news companies? So the vast majority are hired to report and write. And this is important for you to understand because it's regardless of what platform you end up in at graduation. So for the class of 2020, 58% of the students found journalism positions at graduations that were where they were mostly doing reporting and writing, regardless of the platform. In distant second place, 23% were hired to mostly do audio and video production. And then there was a third category that is this growing category, and that is the number of positions where requiring data and computer science skills and data visualization and writing code and such. This is a growing segment of positions, and employers absolutely do look for these skills and have jobs available that require these skills. So altogether, these three categories, writing and reporting, audio and video production, and data and computing skills, that accounts for more than 90% of all of the job descriptions that students report upon graduations. There's another category that's always so negligible at graduation. I want to explain why. On-air reporting positions. On-air reporting, I mean, when reporting live from the scene of a fire. This is Darius Johnson. Back to you, Monica. That kind of job. So our students do get those kinds of jobs, but the reason why we don't have many students reporting those jobs at graduation is because the whole world of local news, video production, and in local stations, it's not a world of internships and fellowships. In those jobs, you're more likely just to get a job, and so that requires time, and it requires a student having time to put together a reel, send out a reel, and it usually these students do find these jobs, but it's sort of over the summer, and that's why. So we definitely do have a lot of students who do on-air reporting at the J School as for their careers. So next, I want to show you the concentration of J School talent in some of the biggest companies in the news industry. And this information comes to you from the Columbia Journalism School LinkedIn group, which, by the way, you can search on your own and click on the alumni button and just enter whatever company or state or country that you're interested in seeing, what kind of J School grads are in those places. This list includes MA and MS and Night Badget graduates who are currently working at those companies. So when I just did a quick count, and it changes a little bit every year, but I did not count freelancers, I did not count alumni who are no longer working at these companies, and I did not count students from the rest of Columbia University, obviously, and I did not count students in the Columbia Summer Publishing course because that is not a degree granting program at the J School. So that figure for the Washington Post, by the way, it's already grown. I mean, just in the last month, 3 of our graduates have been hired full-time. Paulina Villegas from the class of 2010 was hired as a breaking news reporter or general assignment reporter in DC. Andrea Salcedo, class of 2019, was just hired to join the Morning Mix team in Washington, D.C. And Theodora Yu was hired as a researcher reporter for the Hong Kong Bureau. And that just happened, like Andrea and Theodora just posted on Twitter, like in the last 2 weeks, that they're moving to the Washington Post. So briefly, let me just talk about pay. Minimum wage, by the way, is $15 an hour in New York City. So that's going to be the minimum. And it works out to $600 a week. That will be the low. With other internships paying $700 to $1,000 a week, about. But there is a range. And the thing to remember about internships is they are temporary and that they are a foot in the door. And students frequently do parlay an internship into a job and earn considerably much more at that particular company when they go full-time. So for full-time jobs, the typical range is we would say 35 to 65,000, with some students making more. Not a whole lot of students making less, but some students making more than that. And it's depending on the newsroom and the level of experience. And for instance, an experienced editor who graduates from the business and economics concentration is going to be paid considerably more than that. Now I just want to walk you through some fun slides. So I love to just scroll around the internet before I talk to prospective students and find stories that our students have been doing. So we have 2 recent alums who've just been hired at the 19th, which is this hot new site based out of Austin, Texas. It covers gender and the intersection of gender with politics, society, and culture. And so this is Co Bragg. Co was class of 2016. And she, before she got hired by the 19th, she was working at the Jackson Free Press as a reporter. She is from the state of Mississippi, and she was a reporter in Jackson, Mississippi for the Free Press. And then she got some internships or fellowships after that. So she just had the story come out, which is kind of an odd story just a couple of days ago. This is the Mountain State Spotlight that I mentioned to you earlier. And this story was a couple weeks ago, but I wanted to show it to you because Lauren graduated last year, class of 2020, and she has joined this tiny, powerful team of investigative accountability journalists in West Virginia to report on issues in West Virginia, which has a huge news desert. And she's one of the Report for America fellows. We had 9 graduates get hired by Report for America, which you can look up on the internet. It's a phenomenal new nonprofit launch that's aiming to save journalism in the small news deserts all across the country. And I wanted, if you have time, you can check out her story. What is amazing about it, she did a 2-part series on mental health services, a hospital closing in West Virginia, and what that did to the population that it served. I mean, people were literally dying. And what was amazing about this story is it was a long form narrative, investigative piece, but she embedded audio clips from actual, people she was interviewing within the story. And she got her hands on some primary source documents, like a handwritten letter from somebody asking for help, pleading for help. And this was part of her reporting. So this just goes to show you the what's possible in long form narrative online these days. And it was just a beautiful piece and very powerful when it incorporated video and when it incorporated audio and also primary source documents into the story. This is Andrea, who just got hired by the Washington Post. She's on the Morning Mix, and this was a wild story out of Missouri. And the Morning Mix is look at the timestamp, 6:15. The Morning Mix is that sort of bloggy feature in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, that sort of just it's basically to drive traffic to the site, but she just cranks out all this news. Andrea was a Panamanian citizen who I haven't asked her yet, but I do believe she got an O visa or something to stay. But she was a New York Times fellow last year after she graduated from the J School. This is a story by Jem Bartholomew, who was hired as the Wall Street Journal reporter or intern in the London bureau. And Jem was in the MA business program. And he was really excited about this story because, well, it appeared online on the 2nd, but then the Wall Street Journal put it on their front page of the physical newspaper on election day. So he was pretty excited to get a front page story on the day of the election. BuzzFeed. So Emmanuel was a class of 2013, Emmanuel Felton, and he was an education reporter with a lot of expertise in education data collecting. And he came to the J School years ago, and then he was an education reporter at Hechinger Report for a while. And then he came back to the J School as a Spencer Fellow, which is a fellowship for education reporters. And he has now been he's at BuzzFeed now, and he's just a phenomenal writer. I encourage you to look up some of his recent work just from the last month and see what he's writing about. This is a month old, but I wanted to show this to you because this is really exciting. So on September 21st, we learned that 10 of our alums won Emmys for their work. And they ranged from a 2018 graduate of the school with very little experience to veterans with decades of experience. And that included 2 executive producers from Vice News Tonight on HBO, and also CNN's Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. And 3 of these winners were former international students. One was an MA in the politics concentration, and one of the winners actually won twice, 2 Emmys. This is Adam Desiderio is the student who won 2 Emmys in September. So we're really proud of him. Now I wanted to just show you, a lot of students wonder, well, what's going to happen to me when I come to Columbia? And so I wanted to just sort of highlight a few random students and talk to you about their trajectory. So Julia was a history major at Williams College and did not do any journalism until her senior year in college. And she got a summer internship at the Berkshire Eagle, came to Columbia. Her first internship was at the LA Times. And then she followed with a fall internship at CNN. And then that fall applied for the New York Times Fellowship, which is this year-long fellowship in the New York Times newsroom, and got it. And that's where she is now. Brianna was from Florida, and she had several internships. The most recent one was the Politico cybersecurity intern before she got to Columbia. She was heavily involved in her student newspaper, working 40 hours a week, putting the student newspaper out. And she came to Columbia and was hired as a full-time fact checker at the New Yorker, and she met the editors from the New Yorker at the Expo that year. Shin Hee was also a history major from Bowdoin College, and she was a research assistant at the Washington Post in the Beijing bureau, and she is now at Columbia. She worked on a number of different issues, and she's now at the Columbia Journalism Review in a year-long fellowship. Career changers. We always have career changers at the J School, and your past experience really informs what you end up doing. We find. So Pranshu was somebody who he worked in politics before J School. He was in the mayor's office in Philly. He was in the mayor's office in New York. I think he worked in DC as well at some point. He came to Columbia to transition away from policy and politics and get into journalism. And he was hired as a summer intern at the Philadelphia Inquirer. And then they made him City Hall reporter. And, they really valued the fact that he knew everybody in the mayor's office in Philly. And incredibly, I mean, it didn't last long because he decided to apply for the New York Times Fellowship the fall after his graduation. So that's where he is now. Pranshu's on the business page of the New York Times as a fellow. Lucas was a computer science degree and a coder, and he made some games, and he had a really successful computer science career or coding and programming career, got really sick of it, wanted to come to Columbia and get away from coding. And he ended up, falling back in love with coding while he was at J School, because he realized how exciting and it would be to apply his coding skills to journalism. He's a phenomenal data journalist, as it turns out, no surprise. And he went to iNewsSource, which is an investigative news website in San Diego, and he did that for a summer, and then he followed that up with a 6-month fellowship at the Dallas Observer, which is an alt weekly. So that was even more writing. And that's what he wanted, to have a job that was much more writing. And he is now also at the Mountain State Spotlight in West Virginia, doing a phenomenal job. He just did a series on the lack of broadband access in West Virginia, and it has had impact in the state. I mean, politicians are noticing and they're calling for change and all this. So again, his name is Lucas Manfield, and you can look him up and read his stories. Deanna was an assistant district attorney in the Brooklyn DA's office, and her area was, if I'm not mistaken, it was domestic violence, and that was her area of expertise. And she came to Columbia because she decided she wanted to be a journalist and to be more of an investigative journalist. She didn't want to be a lawyer anymore in the DA's office, and she got that first internship at the Washington Post. And they hired her full time, and she's, the lawyer on staff, writing authoritatively about anything legal happening. And then she just recently got hired to cover the court system for the Wall Street Journal. So she's back in New York covering the beat that she knows really, really well from her former years as a DA. Erica was an elementary school teacher in Indianapolis, and she decided to leave that behind and become an investigative education reporter. She came to Columbia, and she went to Hechinger Report after J School, and then she was hired as a full-time education K-8 reporter for the Austin American-Statesman. Again, she met the editor of the Austin American-Statesman at the Expo the year she graduated, and he waited for her to finish her internship at Hechinger Report and then gave her a full-time job. She was laid off during the pandemic, and immediately began doing this incredible freelancing. She got something published in Time magazine, and she got some really great pieces published during that brief period of unemployment. And she's just been made a full-time education reporter for Chalkbeat Indianapolis. And Chalkbeat's a very prestigious and education and investigative education website that's based in New York, actually, but they've got bureaus all over the country. Lastly, we also have students who've had some experience and then they come to Columbia to just sharpen their skills or expand their skills or shift, sort of gain new skills. So Tuan was a fresh graduate from UCLA, but she'd had 4 internships in sports reporting like every single summer. So she was a really good reporter already, but she wanted a full-time job, and she actually had a few job offers in the middle of the pandemic, the thick of the pandemic. She was juggling several job offers, and she took a job at The Athletic as a breaking news reporter, and she was just thrilled to have a full-time job. And that came to her probably in, I'm trying to remember, I think it was June that she got that job. Daniel was in the U.S. Marine Corps. We every year we have a number of military veterans who decide to become reporters. And after he left the Marine Corps, he was a reporter at the Watertown Daily Times, and he was an editor for some time. And he came to the Columbia Business Program to up his game. And despite his experience level, he took an internship at Bloomberg after graduation. And that's because, like I said before, Bloomberg uses its internship program to recruit and find new talent and retain the best talent of the summer. And he was great, and they kept him and they hired him full time. So he's still at Bloomberg. Maggie was a arts and culture reporter, and she had been at the AV Club, which is a really hot site covering arts and culture, but it didn't pay enough. It wasn't a particularly full-time job, and she she really wanted like a more more substantial career, and she also wanted more skills. She was a writer. She had a writing undergrad, like a creative writing background, and she really wanted to learn some new skills. So she came to Columbia, fell in love with radio, as many students do, and she got a year-long fellowship at Colorado Public Radio, reporting on arts and culture in Colorado. So that's all I had. I don't know if John's getting any questions, but I thought I would just I'll hang out, if anybody has questions for later.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Gina. We don't have any specific questions about career development right now. I think many people, obviously they're very interested in the careers, but I think considering the deadlines coming up, we're getting a flurry of application questions. So
okay, good.
We thank you so much for this amazing presentation and for all of this detailed work that you've done. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good luck, everyone.
All right, so there have been some questions in the chat about the application process, things like that. I'll go over as many as I can. There are some questions about tuition and financial aid. And so, yeah, I'll start with that. So there are 2 applications here at Columbia. There's one for, admissions, and there's one for scholarships. The admissions applications deadline for the Master of Science program is December 15th, with things that you don't have control over, like, references or, transcripts, with a final due date of January 10th. For the Master of Arts program, it is a deadline of January 6th for everything you do have control over, and January 10th for those things you don't have control over. Somebody writing a reference letter for you, your school submitting transcripts. For the dual degree with computer science, the hard deadline is January 15th for everything, because the application for that is through the engineering school. The scholarship application will open sometime in December. And the due date for that, I'm so sorry, is it January 15th?
January 15th.
Thank you. It is
And
January
it will open
15th.
December 1.
It will open December 1st. It is due January 15th. You must submit the scholarship application to be considered for funds at Columbia University. We do not extend scholarship funding to those who do not. Every year we have people who forget, and it is always devastating because there are people who have great applications and who probably would have gotten aid, but they do not. People often ask questions about what the average, amount of scholarship that somebody receives is. So I'm just gonna post a little link in this chat right here to our average scholarships, the average amount per program, I should say. And so that gives you kind of an idea of, of those who apply, how many of those students on average get funding, what's the average amount. So that'll give you a really solid idea. Many of you are asking questions about our dual degree programs. Overall, if you want to do a dual degree program with a Columbia program, so let's say, for example, you want to do an MS in journalism, but also get an MPA at SIPA, the School of International Public Affairs, or you want to do the journalism degree and also the law degree. The process for that is applying to both schools. If you are admitted to both schools, voila, you are a dual degree student. And you will then basically work with us and the the co-school at Columbia on how the curriculum needs to be played out. Essentially, in order to do that, if you want to do law school, for example, reach out to the law school because you have to do your first year at the law school. You will then come to the journalism school. You will then complete at the law school. There are just nitty-gritty logistics that each school needs you to adhere to. So should you be admitted to both of those, that's fantastic. When we will work with you to make sure that the schedule works out overall. The scholarship application is something that is only for our school. So whatever other kind of scholarship application or financial aid application that another school at Columbia has, definitely go on their website, definitely look at their application and financial aid requirements so that you are submitting the necessary material to both schools. Let's see what else is there. As many of you heard, you don't need to have a robust amount of journalistic experience if you want to do something like the MS program. You do for the MA program. It does require that you have a fundamental skill set in reporting, specifically multi-source reporting. We really do like to see that you've done some ambitious multi-source reporting to really be qualified for something like the MA program. The MS, you can really do the heavy lifting with your essays. You heard our alums talk about, how they took a job that really, on paper seems like it has nothing to do with journalism, but they found pieces that speak to a journalistic quality and were able to make the case for themselves in their essays. To enhance an application, you can just do some independent reporting, pitch a story to a local outlet. It's a really great way to start. You can do some freelance and, it doesn't need to be published. It can be something that you just write for yourself that really helps an application. For the data degree program, many people have questions about that. You don't need to have a background in data analytics. That's something they will teach you here. It is nice to have a background in journalism because it's a lot to learn both the fundamentals of journalism and the fundamentals of data analytics all in a 12-month period. So they do like to see that you've taken some steps to do some reporting, whether it's your school newspaper or you've done some freelance work. They want to know that you've got some of the skills, in your toolkit, but you don't need to have a robust amount of, data analytics experience. For the dual degree with computer science, they are looking for somebody who has taken 2 classes specifically, linear algebra or discrete maths. If you've taken those classes and you've done well in those classes, you may be qualified to do the dual degree with the computer science MS at the engineering school. It is a pretty rigorous master's program there. So they do want to see that you've taken some quantitative classes, specifically the 2 that I mentioned. And let's see. Do employers prefer the MA or the MS? Both of our students are well employed. I think that when it comes to, what, employers are looking for, it really depends on what it is they're actually, what it is they actually need. If they need somebody with multimedia skills, I think they're going to be looking at the MS program graduates, unless the MA student came in with those multimedia skills. The MA is really an interdisciplinary track to give you an expertise in a subject area. It's not designed to give you those fundamental reporting skills, writing skills, multimedia skills. They're assuming you've already got that. So if somebody's looking for somebody who can do like video or web content or photojournalism or anything with data, they're really going to be looking at our MS students, I would imagine. So it really depends on what the actual outlet is looking for. But both students do very well. How can applicants set their personal statement apart? I would say, your journalistic pieces, are things, we have a very, traditional mindset of journalism. It's subjective. it's free of artifice. It is, you know, to the point. But I think your personal statement is something where you can show us your writing ability, show us your true writing, your true voice as a writer, and always know that you can. The point of the application is to make a larger case for yourself. That is, I'm a journalist. So I think weaving with that throughout your application to show a through line that, you know, there are specific, you know, experiences you had in your personal statement or specific qualities that you exhibit, whether that's curiosity, determination, a fascination for understanding people, speaking with people. I think those elements can really help a personal or professional essay. Especially if you don't have a journalistic background, because you're kind of, you know, cueing us, you know, key characteristics that can really propel you in this field. So I think about why you love journalism, because it is such a narrow topic. We only do journalism at the journalism school, and really think about what makes that the career for you and why you're passionate about that. Those are ways that you can really set your essays apart. All right, so that was rapid fire. I hope I got the bulk of your questions answered. I'm not seeing any more in the chat. So let me see here. I do think that if you have some really specific questions about yourself, when it comes to, you know, which program is right for you, things like that, like, I really encourage you to reach out to us. We're very accessible. We love counseling students. And so we're happy to talk to you about, you know, whether, you know, an MA program at GSAS would be better for you, or if a program at the journalism school, you know, if you're really thinking about, like, what do you want to do with your life? What's the best program for you? Reach out to apply.journalism and we're happy to go over that. Other than that, I don't think that there's one more question about the deferral policy. We rarely grant deferrals. Obviously, this year was unique given the situation. So we were much more flexible with that. But if you feel like you are preparing an application for next year and next year may not be the best time for you, I encourage you to apply maybe a year later when you feel like you're going to be really ready for graduate school, because it's very rare that we allow for deferrals. They are for extreme cases only. So if you're thinking it might not be the best time next year, maybe wait a little bit. We can also talk about that individually too. All right, but thank you all so much. That's it. Those are all the questions we have.
I think so. We're all set. Christine, would you like to say anything to close?
Just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody for joining us today. We know that it's a Saturday and that you have many other things to do. And we also know that you've got many other choices. So as you're thinking about what you would like to do, when you would like to do it, which directions you're thinking about going in for yourself professionally, and whether a journalism education would assist you in that, as John said, we're very, very happy. Just reach out to us. We're happy to talk with you by telephone, by Zoom, by email, any way that's convenient for you. Thanks again, and we will see you on other webinars, upcoming webinars. Bye now.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.